This is the Real Estate Powerplay podcast, getting you the information that you need to be a successful real estate investor. Hosted by Mark Monroe, Ronnie Walker, Gabe Rodarte, and me, Marty Grizzanti. Combined, we've done thousands of real estate transactions. So get ready for real stories and true case studies on finding deals, growing portfolios, and making money. Welcome to the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Powerplay podcast. We have an amazing guest on today, one that has done all kinds of real estate deals. He's done real estate developments all across the United States. He's done high-end condos, resorts, commercial buildings, and he really specializes in being able to do capital structures and take your money and allow it to expand and grow at really using the velocity of capital to move forward. So we have Cowboy Joe on our podcast today, and Gabe is my co-host. Guys, how are we doing today?
What's up? What's up? Doing great, man. It's a beautiful day here in Texas.
Nice. Joe, how are you?
I'm finer than frogs hair split three ways. You can't get much finer than that. But yeah, about the same thing. I'm on the Gulf Coast of Alabama. We got bright blue skies, sunshine, and crystal clear water today. So enjoying life.
No major hurricanes, no major storms. You're good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Joe, I want to thank you for being on the Real Estate Powerplay podcast and coming on and really just kind of discussing your story and what your niche is. And I think for our audience, this is going to be a real treat. You know, we talk a lot about, what it looks like to add strategies to your business, right? And things that we like to call, the power play moves. And I think some of the things that you go into, man, are really just that. They're power play moves, right? They're moves to advance and to grow and to level up here in the industry. So I'm excited to jump in. But before we go into that, if you would kind of take me back, man, take me back to what it looked like at the beginning. Like, how did you go from where you were into the real estate industry? And what was that journey like for you?
Well, my love for real estate comes from my grandfather. My grandfather, I was raised on a ranch. He actually had 3 ranches, and we were always making improvements to the land, clearing for pasture, clearing undergrowth, clearing fence lines, things like that. So that's where my love for land came from. And then basically worked for a little bitty company called Waste Management Incorporated doing environmental remediation for about 11 years. Decided to go in business for myself and created a extremely large environmental remediation company, government contracting company. But that was still improving land. That was fixing other people's problems. And then just migrated back to real estate. I started doing the fix and flips and things like that because people are like, okay, you've got to start and move up at kind of like Monopoly. You buy 1 greenhouse and then you move up to 4 greenhouses and you can buy a hotel.
Right.
People are like, well, you can't do land development. Finally, I said, that's bull. I know how to do it. I can find the money. Started doing development, pretty much stuck with it. The reason I know as much as I do about capital structures is because 08, 09 literally broke me. I mean, it carried me to less than zero. And it was all because of the capital structures. And I'm sure y'all may have been taught some of these same things, that money sitting in a checking account was dead money. It wasn't, if you weren't working it, it was no good to you. The other thing is get lines of credit for reserves. So if you need them, you've got them. Well, lines of credit aren't reserves. And there's a thing called opportunity costs that if you don't have money sitting in an account, you're actually costing yourself way more money than if you've got it deployed.
Yeah, so let's back, because I think this is really cool. And for the people who don't know, can you unpack what you mean by capital structures, right? When you say having the capital structures in place, unpack that for us, like, and for the audience of what you mean. Is it having a certain amount of cash versus a certain amount of lending? Is it, getting funds from a certain source? Like, unpack what you mean so people are kind of on that same page.
Definitely. Capital structure, basically, it has 3 parts. You have debt, you have equity, and you have reserves. And reserves is your foundation. And I do a ton of projects that I could use my own cash, but I bring in equity partners because, again, my cash sitting and available allows me more opportunity to do more projects. Let's say, for example, you're doing $1 million project and you need $100,000 to make that project happen. Well, if you use your cash, you're tied up in that one project. Whereas if you bring on an equity partner, yeah, let's say you give up 30% of the project, big deal. You've got that $100,000, you can sit and qualify for 5 more projects. So you end up doing $5 million worth of work that you've got 70% of versus $1 million worth of work that you got 100% of. That's the difference in the opportunity cost. That's your reserves and having that money available if you do have a problem. And then equity is exactly that. That is, you bring in the partners that are equity. They take a position in the upside, but you don't have the obligation to pay in the process of doing the project or holding the project. For example, if you got apartment complexes, you don't have a debt payment. And then debt is exactly what it is. And then debt, a lot of people don't realize that they can be taking on non-strategic debt because they're paying a higher loan constant than what their actual cap rate is. Like you see mortgage companies push 15-year mortgages at a lower interest rate when actually the 30-year mortgage has a lower loan constant, although it's at a higher interest rate. And loan constant's nothing but your measurement of your obligation to pay. How much are you going to have to pay in that year? And the lower the loan constant you have, the safer the structure is. You can always pay more on that. You can pay more on that 30-year mortgage. Let's say you have a good year and you want to pay some additional principal down. You can pay down, but you don't have the obligation to. Whereas with the 15-year note, you have the obligation to make those payments regardless of whether or not the property's cash flowing properly.
And I want to chirp into that real quick, because one of the things that maybe you could highlight for those who are listening, and even for me, because I remember 2008. My story is, I saw some freaking amazing deals that if I knew how to buy in 2008, because I was not heavy in real estate investing, but I was in the construction. I was the flipper. I was the one flipping for everybody else. I was that guy, and that's how I got involved. And so I was the actual contractor. And so, but man, I saw some great deals going on during 08, 09, even 010 that, they would have been 5X right now in great neighborhoods. But what ended up happening is this one particular one where they wanted to do a 15-year note. They put themselves in a 15-year note because they wanted to get it paid down soon. Someone sold them on that thing. And now their note is higher, way higher, that their obligation to pay. And that's exactly what you're talking about, right, Joe, is that now they have this huge obligation and they can't fulfill it. They can't refi at the time. The banks are stopping what they're doing. Very similar to right now in, October 2022, where refinancing just kind of doesn't make sense right now unless you absolutely have to. Banks are kind of putting them on a hold anyways. And so now they're in a place where instead of making $1,500 a month, now they're spending $2,500 a month in that. And so it puts them in a really tight jam. And that's what you're talking about, right?
100%. And that's where reserves are critical, making sure you have money to handle that. But more importantly is setting it up on the front end to create as safe of a capital structure as possible, creating the biggest spread. And that's where you measure the cap rate, which is the cash flow off of the property, and making sure that your loan constant is lower. And you want to try to make sure that if you can get 2% or better spread, you're just creating a better thing. And then the other metrics, and these are metrics that the bank uses, DCR, which is your debt service, and then BER, which is your break-even ratio. You want to make sure that you're setting everything up. You're looking at it from a bank standpoint on the front end. Back in 07, 06, all the people were teaching, you just go ahead and get a HELOC against this rental property to 110%, buy another property and do the exact same thing. And you end up with 110, 120% leverage versus having a BER below 80%, so that you do have room to run. Same thing with your equity partners. A lot of beginning investors give away too much equity to their partners, and they don't have room to sell additional equity if you do have a problem. I mean, you want to be fair with your equity partners. You want them to make a great return, and that's the key, is creating win-win-win situations. It's not a deal if everybody doesn't win. So, but it's looking in the future, not right now. It's better off to end up having a deal you're not doing and avoid a future problem than to do a deal because it looks good in the present and not looking at the future and what can bite you in the butt.
Joe, I really like what you're saying, and I've thought about capital before as it's kind of like fire, right? It's like if you have fire, yeah, you can cook a steak, but if the fire is completely out of control, it can burn your house down, right? And I think that what you're talking about with capital is being able to create a mechanism, a strategy, almost like, let's say it was a grill that you funnel the gas through to create a controlled burn so you can allocate your resources appropriately, and being able to structure it. So not only, because I don't hear you say, yo, just get into a whole bunch of deals. What I'm hearing you say is make sure you are structuring your deals in a way that gives you the type of steak you want to cook, rather than gets completely out of control that you're just trying to manage the burn afterwards. Could you unpack, you talked about debt service ratio, you talked about your break-even point. When you're going into a deal, like if you were to dumb it down, right, for somebody who is coming in and is like, all right, I've got 250 grand. I'm looking at different commercial properties. What should they be thinking on the front end if they don't really understand all of the details? How should they be looking at the deal? Should they bring in partners? Like if I'm going in, should they take it down themselves? Is there a particular recommendation that you would say of like sitting down and looking at your financials? What would you recommend going into or starting to get into these bigger deals?
Well, if you're trying to grow, if you're just trying to get into one deal and you're not looking at trying to make it a full-time job, you're just trying to get some additional cash flow, then if you want to put your money in, that's great. I don't teach my people to do that strictly because of the opportunity cost. And I would rather have equity partners and create a safer deal for everybody involved. And then on determining how much equity to give a partner, it's you work backwards. What kind of return are they looking for on their money? I mean, right now, if you can give a person an 8 to 10% return on their money, then they think you're golden. Well, if you advertise that and then you give them 20, they're a partner for life.
Yeah.
And so I look at what is that particular project going to return them, and that's how I calculate the equity to give them. And then I structure literally everything with partners. I do very little where I'm putting a lot of my own money in, strictly because of having that opportunity cost to grow. And that works in everything. That's not just real estate. That's private equity. That's digital assets. That's pre-IPO. Anything that you're looking at that is a cash flowing investment. And I add stable to that because debt basically magnifies the instability of an asset. So that's the reason you have to be cautious with debt, is because all assets have an underlying instability, even real estate. So you just want to make sure that you're not, like you said, you don't want to burn your house down trying to cook your steak. And the reason I know as much as I do about it is because I burnt down my house, my development, my hunting lodge, a marriage, and everything else in 08, 09. So, I mean, I burn it all to the ground. I don't go halfway when I do something. If I'm going to burn it all the way down, it's burnt all the way down. Mm-hmm. So that's why I did the deep dive in learning about this, to where not only I protect myself, but I protect my partners, my investors, and then I truly do love teaching it. So I help my students be able to structure things to where they are creating safer deals.
Sweet. So to give everyone an example of what kind of structure you're talking about, what is a typical asset class that you're looking at? I mean, I know you go pretty far and wide, man, and that's one of the blessings of, like, if you guys want to go connect with Joe, we're going to give you some of the highlights of how to get back in touch with him and stuff through his program. But what are just some of the examples that you can give us of, like, how you're applying some of these skills with people?
Short-term rentals, vacation rentals, basically buying and holding those, apartment complexes in stable A and B areas that are middle to middle upper income, not very high level, but not low level. Because with some of the things that are coming down the pipe, or that our people are forecasting coming down the pipe, those tend to be the most stable asset class you can be in. And if we have another repeat of 0809, there's going to be plenty of people demand for that commodity that aren't able to buy because they've just collapsed what they already had.
So yeah, I really like that. So when you're going, I'm kind of like, so like with the Airbnbs, right? So I'm buying another Airbnb right now. I'm in the process of purchasing it. If I was, say, your student going in and saying, hey, this one, so I'm in West Michigan. Okay. So I'm buying it. It's about a mile from the beach. It's a sweet property. My wife actually manages our Airbnbs and kind of goes in and does that. How would you, if I was your student coming in and saying, okay, here's how we should structure this, right? To protect you, like you said earlier, you said, hey, we don't want to just think about now. We want to think and kind of project ourselves into the future, right? Into the future. Well, obviously, we're not just looking at best case scenario. We're looking at worst case scenario, so we can avoid that fire. Like, how would you walk someone through, this is the capital structures you should get in place. This is what I would recommend if this is your strategy. What would that look like?
But typically on Airbnbs, I try to structure it around, okay, let's say worst case scenario, let's say your municipality shuts down Airbnbs and you had to go to long-term rental. Is what will long-term rental support on the debt structure side of things? And then DCRs, banks usually look for a 1.2 or greater. That just basically means that you're making 20% more than what the debt coverage is, and then a break-even ratio of 80% or lower. And again, that means your income has to drop 80% before the debt coverage is in jeopardy. And then make sure you have reserves. And I'm a lot more conservative than I used to be. I try to make sure I got 6 months to a year of reserves on each project that I have, and then I have secondary reserves beyond that.
So it's like, hey, I got reserves, and then I've got a war chest in case things get real bad.
Just in case.
Right. Nice.
Cool. So I got a question on what you see right now, since your experience, you've gone through this whole thing, right? What are you starting to get a little like excited, nervous about what's happening right now? I mean, we're in, for those who are listening to this, probably next month this will come out. So we're in October 2022, right? Things are starting to happen. I'm in the Houston market. I could already see I'm having brokers call me up and say, hey, someone backed out of this deal. They can't close at a freaking 7.25% loan that just got changed overnight for them. So are you starting to see some similar things?
Days on market is longer, and we've actually had a couple of deals fell through, but we deal more with investors. But it was a case of their deal fell through. They were doing 1031 exchanges, and their deal fell through on the retail side. So yes, there's starting to be deals fall through. I don't think, and again, people talk about the real estate market, but I mean, we have multiple markets.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
I really don't think our area down on the Gulf Coast, Gulf Shores, Alabama, is going to see a significant drop. We may hit a stale period just because our properties are so undervalued right now And people, well, I mean, it's higher than it's ever been. But when you look at the money that they make versus California, New York, Colorado, and places like that, we've got a lot of investors that are becoming aware of this area.
Wow.
And I actually think we'll have a stale period, but I don't know if we'll see a significant drop. And then it's very specific to the areas.
So I have a question, really, really kind of personal, because you talked a little bit about 2008 and what happened to you. What is something that you've done in kind of your career in structuring these deals or project? Like, what are you most proud of, right? That you've accomplished, say, in the last, 13 years since that, coming out of this. You talked about you went to the woodshed and you did a deep dive into this process. I want to know what Cowboy Joe is most proud of out of this whole process, right? Like, what are you most proud of? What kind of systems have you put in place out of being something that you've accomplished or gone? I want to hear some of those win stories that you have.
Thanks for that question. I'm going to tell you what I'm most proud of is the amount of mental and heart work that I've done. Because I started back, I mean, I went to zero and started back doing the exact same strategies and was going backwards. And started one of my mentors, Dr. Alok Trivedi. He's a human performance expert. And I went to him, I said, I don't want to hear that I've got a subconscious block. If I knew what it was, I'd already removed it. Just take a 2x4 and knock the hell out of it. But doing the work, well, and he told me, he said, well, until you get rid of that anger, you're not going to go anywhere. And I laughed at him. I said, Doc, if you told 100 people that knew me I was an angry person, they'd laugh at you too. And he said, keep believing that if you want to. And basically reflecting back over my life, my dad was killed when I was 6. I was projected to play pro ball and blew out both knees between high school and college, and then was worth $98 million and went to less than zero. Lost a hunting lodge that I had dreams of teaching my grandkids to hunt and fish on. So I was stuck because of all of that anger. And I'm going to say anger, resentment, shame, and guilt, those emotions kill more people than everything else combined. They're the cause of most things. Yeah. Now I live an inspired life in all 7 areas. I've got amazing friends that are trying to impact the world. I've got an amazing wife that supports me, and I'm in good health. I get to learn every day. I get to teach every day, and do pretty okay on the financial side of things as well. Before, I was chasing money at the detriment to everything. I mean, I destroyed my health 3 different times during the course of my life. I was in a marriage that I was miserable. 90% of my friends were there for what could I give them or who could I introduce them to. And now I've literally built a life that I've designed it the way I want to live. And that's the biggest difference.
So what would you... Yeah, I really like that, because I think that internally, like that process of recreating yourself, right? Like getting to zero, it's almost like rock bottom forces you to, like what your mentor said, it just forces you to be like, dude, if you keep believing what you're believing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. You know what I'm saying? You're just, right? That's insanity. If you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same result. What would you recommend to someone who just feels like, man, I see these people are successful. I'm trying so hard, and I want to just, it's not even, I want to make $1 million. It's, man, in this tough time, I just want to breathe. I want to take that next step and start climbing that ladder out of this. Does it start with, setting back and focusing on real estate strategy? Does it start with, getting yourself right and being content? Like, where did that start for you? And then I want to hear, like, why not turn away from real estate? Why turn back into it if it burned you so bad? And that journey that led you from there to the Joe we know today, right? That's all over. That's teaching people essentially how to structure their life so that they have, what I hear anyway, is that they have peace of mind, right? No matter what the economy. You're trying to avoid brain damage, right? You're trying to avoid total catastrophe. Instead, it's like, structure your life and your deals so you have this peace of mind, and so that you have the family you want, you have the friends you want, you have the money you want, you have the life you want. In essence, pursuing freedom. What would you recommend to turn to that path?
Well, first off, invest in yourself. And you said it, real estate, where I turn back to it. Well, I've had the great fortune and the great misfortune of being raised in Alabama, to where you were 10 foot tall and bulletproof sober. So you didn't want to drink, you were 100 foot tall and invincible.
Yeah.
So if you punch me in the mouth, you better kill me, because it's going to be a fight until I am dead. That's why I got back in real estate. It's like the old saying, if you get thrown from a horse, you get back on it. But invest in yourself and make sure that you have a mentor that understands the mindset. And I don't like using mindset, because intellectualizing something and knowing it doesn't do you any good. It's not until you get into your heart and you truly believe in your heart that it makes a difference.
What would you invest in? I don't mean to cut you off. I just think this is really good. Because I think you're making just a really solid point, right? This idea of investment. Like, what would you invest in?
Well, first off, in the whole philosophy and psychology around investing, if that's what you want to be as a full-time investor, make sure that your mentors are living the life that you want to live. There's a lot of mentors out there that are miserable, and they're not living a life that I want to live. I'm not going to invest in that kind of mentor and coach. So make sure that the people that you invest in are living the life that you're wanting to live. Because if they're not living the life you want to live, they're not going to be able to help you get to the point of where you're living the life you want to live.
One of the things that people don't know about Joe, that I got a chance to look into Joe's life a little bit. I love social media. So, the stuff that Ronnie's asking, I was looking at your site and everything. I'm like, dude, you're my type of guy. Ronnie and I, Marty's on the show. So Marty's not on here. Mark, the Powerplay group of guys, there's 4 of us, and we are 100% mindset. And it's not like we don't talk about it. And this is one of the things that, we all had to go through our struggles and our time, and we all are at a decent level in real estate investing in our careers. But, there's this part where most people have to change, Joe, from one career, right, to another. Most people aren't starting off in real estate investing when they're 18 years old, right? I mean, they came from somewhere, hurts, bruises. You know what? I just want to go follow my dreams, or I want to go do something else. And so you kind of take a little bit of that baggage with you, all your other misconceptions. You're trying to find someone to help you go through what a contract is, what an option period is, and all these other things that you're trying to learn, right? Because it's a whole new industry. And you hear the phrase of going, well, we need to work on your mindset and stuff like that. And it's brushed over. But if I were to go back, I could tell you we all have before, where you just go, how many mistakes have you made because the mindset just wasn't in alignment, right? And that's why I have Go Vertical. That's my group. That's my brand. I care about you going vertical in your own life. It's all the way down. It's all the way up. It's through your business. It's through your family. It's through your life. And one of the cool things that Joe has is he has a mindset mastery thing also, right? Where you go and you help people through the mindset process. But sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom. Sometimes it doesn't. But this is so key. And we don't talk about it enough, Ronnie, where we really talk about the mindset of what the stuff that Joe's talking about, like some of that deeper thing of going, yeah, okay, there's some issues there. And you just brush over it because you got to get the next deal, right? You have goals, Joe. You got to keep going, Joe. You got to keep pushing. And then the next thing you know, you're like, you know what? Something happened to me. I didn't know I was bothered freaking 15 years ago. And it's affecting how I'm doing my life right now. Right. And so there's some really cool things that we're talking about here that we hardly ever get to hit on, because we talk about deal structuring and acquiring properties and doing other stuff. And, just to kind of, I'm here at someone else's mastermind. Okay. This is a couple months back. And he's like, just come in and do a training. Okay. I'll do a training. So I do a training. There's probably 15 people in the room. I get done, the lady in the back, and she goes, Gabe, I've known you for 10 years. I remember you doing something like this 10 years ago, but I remember when you just got started. Right. And this is, I don't know, maybe it was 10 years, 8 years. I can't remember, whatever she said. She goes, the difference between you and me, she's probably 15 years older than me. She goes, your mindset has been transformed since the first time I met you. Like, you don't even look like the same guy. And she's like, the difference between me is my mindset's just like, I really feel like I'm the same person from that long ago. And I don't know, there's just something there. So I don't know, like you hinted on it, Ronnie, and then Joe's hinting on it. I just had a chirp up going, this is so key and important to transform. And everyone we bring on talks and hints around it. But Joe, this is one of the key things of this is so core and so key for you to grow on to become more successful in whatever area of business you want to do. So I have a question towards that though. What is like I wouldn't want to call it a key KPI or an indicator, but what are some indicators that you're looking for whenever you bring on a student or something and you're going, how can I help this person get to this next level?
Well, the universe is always going to be in balance, and that's a whole nother deep subject we could carry way down a rabbit hole. It's our perceptions that are out of balance, and we have traumas. And here's the thing, a trauma can be negative or positive, because like one of the traumas I had was I was a star football player. That was all positive. So I compared everything that I did to, was I as successful as I was as a middle linebacker? And until we heal those traumas and dissolve the charge around them, we stay stuck around those. For example, if you have a major trauma at the age of 6, that charge is making you make decisions as a 6-year-old versus a middle 50s year, what you think is a mature male making a decision. You're actually making the decision from the emotional age of a 6-year-old because of not still having that charge around that trauma. The more charges that we can dissolve and bring to neutral, the more balanced we become, the more grounded we become, and the more we can see both sides when we're making decisions.
Yo, that's actually really, really, really powerful. And I think, and the reason why is, I've seen in my own life, right, where you're going through something and you find yourself like maybe 3 conversations in with somebody, or you're halfway into this deal and you're like, how the heck did I even get here? You know what I'm saying? And you're just like, what the heck happened? And then you start going back and you start like recording. I started doing this about, I think 5 years ago, where I'd go back and I'd start literally writing out the trends of my own life, right? Like literally writing out, okay, when I get angry, why am I getting angry? Boom, 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 right? Okay, I find myself in this situation 3 or 4 times with this type of seller. What happened? What did I do? And what happens is we're kind of like automatically programmed to skip over things. But like what you're saying is, if you can isolate, this is what I'm trying to get away from, or this is what I'm trying to prove to myself. Like you said, the positive trauma. Like I was in the Junior Olympics as a goalie in Alaska, kind of going through. We got silver in our tournament, and a lot of times it's like, okay, I was this star goalie, and then I get out and I'm starting to get beat up in the business world. And you're like, dude, I'm supposed to be this guy. Like, why am I going through this crap? Right? Like, what is going on? And I really like that, because we have to be able to shed that, right? We have to be able to say, okay, I'm recreating myself. Okay, what do I want? And what am I tying this to? And how can there's a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, right? How can I break the habit
I love it.
of being like this normal responsibility, this limited thinking, this limited being, and kind of break free of those chains so I can go to the next level, so I can experience the financial freedom that I want, that I can experience the freedom in my marriage that I want, that I can experience the freedom in friendships. Like what you said, it's funny when you talk about friendships, because I've experienced it where you find yourself like surrounded and you're like, you almost feel like a utility. You know what I'm saying? Like people are using you for your utility because you're good at things rather than genuinely concerned. There's another book called The 12 Rules of Life. He's like, surround yourself with people who actually care about you. You know what I'm saying? And when you surround yourself with those people, and you can pay to get in groups to be a part of those people, right? Like you can get around people who have similar mindsets and cut out the people who don't want you to win, right? Who are just envious of you or jealous of you. Just because you grew up with them doesn't mean you have to be around them. And so I want to kind of take that next step. So we've talked about a little bit about your journey of getting free, of recreating yourself, of stepping into that. Was there a moment, bringing it back to the real estate, was there like what I'd like to call a power play move, or was it a big deal, or was it a series of small deals that, as you're working through this process and you're going through this struggle, that all of your work almost seemed to kind of cascade on itself, right? It was like either one deal, or it was like this thing put in place, this thing put in place, this thing put in place. And it was no longer I'm swimming upstream, but I'm going with the tide in the direction I want to go. What was that like? What was that like in your journey?
The one power play move is we were building one spec house at a time, and we're staying away from development. And then we took on this one small development project it was real small, and we created what's called a beach cottage subdivision. That's something down here that you're basically creating a zero lot line, meaning you don't have setbacks. It's not a condo, it's individual buildings, and there's just enough separation between them to have them as beach cottages. So it's a cross between a true subdivision and a condo. And we stepped out and did that. And I mean, it literally stretched us beyond thin. You could read a newspaper through both me and my partner. We were stretched so thin. But once that project got to the point where we started selling units, the next project showed up and it was bigger. Then the next project showed up and it was bigger. Then the next project. And then all of a sudden people were wanting for me to consult with them on projects. And it cascaded from there. But it was taking that first initial back into development versus staying small.
Wow.
What was the difference?
Wow. I got that. I wrote that down. You know what I like about this is that the power play move, I'm guessing it was a stretch, right? It sounded like it was, where you're a little nervous getting into this. You're going to try something new, but yet it transformed your perspective and the contacts, the people you're around. Everything changes at this point, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a major shift.
Dang. So that is, and so those who are listening to this is something to be encouraged over, because sometimes we're looking at something like I'm transitioning and I'm doing some industrial type things, and I got some light industrial guys and I got some heavy like bigger industrial buildings. And, it's a shift for me. I came from a different background and I'm buying other stuff, and I have, backing, and I did all my work and all the legwork, and now it's time to put in, and now we're putting LOIs on a lot of properties and looking to acquire, right? But at the same time, it's a little nerve-wracking whenever you're going, I'm going to go branch out to another branch of real estate, right? And I'm going to do something different. You just don't know what's going to hit sometimes, right? You're just doing that next step that's right in front of you. And it didn't seem like you planned this thing out for 5 years of this is what I'm going to do. Right. You get what I'm saying? Like, this is something that seemed like it happened, not rather quickly, but you're like, this is the opportunity and this is what we're going to do. And what would you say to those people who are listening who might be seeing that opportunity, but they're just like freaking just scared. Like, oh my gosh, like this was like, of course it's going to take time. Of course you're going to be burnt. Of course, like your energy is going to be exhausted into this thing. But what would you do for encouragement for those type of people?
Well, first off, if it's something that is truly what you love to do, what you can see yourself doing in the future, and something that you would do if you didn't make a dime, I mean, don't do it to chase the money. But if it's something that you step out there, and here's the thing, and we are who we are. Every event in our life has built us to who we are. You're not really trying to shed who you were. It's just being aware and healing that charge to where you see there were both sides to that event, and being grateful for that event, knowing that it built you to who you are today. I mean, if I hadn't have gone through the experiences I've gone through in life, I wouldn't be able to make the impact that I make now and be able to help others reach financial independence because of giving them a different way of thinking.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Let's do a couple things before we close out. Ronnie, you want to do some of those questions at all before we close out?
Yeah. I really like the power play move that you talked about and kind of, where you're going. If you could leave, I had a couple questions, but I'm actually going to ask a different one. In light of this, if you could leave, one piece of advice for someone currently in where the market's at with what you've got going on and the stuff that you're teaching, and they wanted to come to Joe, right? If they came to Cowboy Joe and they're like, hey man, I'm thinking about joining your program. Here's what I got in life. Should I take this step or not? What would you want to talk to them about? And what would your advice be to someone who's, either fairly new or they've got a little bit of experience, but they're trying to go to that next level?
Well, some of what I just was talking about is make sure that it's something that they want to be, not something they're doing. And there's a lot of people that think they've got to do this to be that. Well, it actually works completely backwards. You have to be that before you can even think about doing it. If you're not a real estate investor, don't do real estate investing. If you're not a private equity person, don't do private equity. And who is it truly that you want to be? And then the action steps around it. And if that is something that's truly what they want to be, they're not trying to do it to be successful, to have the money and everything else, then see where they're at from a standpoint of the psychology of it, the mindset of it. And there's literally nothing that can stop you from being what you want to be.
Man, that I think that's really good. The way I've thought about it in my past, and I organize it, and I've heard it. The formula I got was, who do you want to be, number one, and then how do you want to make your money, and then what sacrifices are you willing to take to go to whatever level you want to hit. And it's like this, almost like this 3-step process. It starts with, who do I really want to be? And then it's like, okay, I want to be a real estate investor. Well, then how do you want to make your money? Do you want to go into commercial and do apartments? Do you want to do storage? Do you want to do single family flips? How much resources do you have at the moment and what that path is going to look like? So Joe, that's awesome. Guys, Joe, I want to thank you so much for just coming on and sharing your wisdom, kind of sharing your story and getting really personal with us. If people wanted to reach out to you or look you up, where could they find you?
The best way to get a hold of me is cowboyjoe.me. That's cowboyjoe.me. There's actually a link in there to schedule it. It has all of my services, has more about me. But Ron, I want to thank you for inviting me on the show. It's my pleasure. You have me in my highest values of teaching others and learning. I study everything from the secrets of the universe to health to investing, and like we talked about for a bulk of the show is capital structures. There's not a day that I am not learning something new, and there's very rarely a day that I'm not trying to teach it to somebody.
Man.
So thank you for inviting me on the show.
Absolutely. And guys, we come to you every Thursday morning here at Real Estate Powerplay. You can find us on all the major podcast places, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. So until next time, guys, thank you.
Thank you, guys. See you.
This has been another episode of Real Estate Powerplay, guiding real estate entrepreneurs to a brighter future. If you liked what you heard, consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast, or follow us on YouTube at Real Estate Powerplay.